stage is bare, the seats are empty, everyone has gone home. But we'll be together again. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll cheer. We'll leap to our feet and applaud. Until then, help us save your seat. Good evening, everybody. Hello, my name is Willie White. I'm the Artistic Director of Dublin Theatre Festival, and very shortly I will be joined by Fiona Shaw, with whom we're going to have an in-conversation. Hi, Fiona, how are you?
Hello, Willie. No, I'm fine.
Hello, from the north side of the Dublin metropolis to North London. Hello.
Yes, exactly. North and rainy, in my case.
Actually, we've got blue skies here, thankfully. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us. Each year, the festival honours somebody who's made a massive contribution to theatre. I think that fits you. Unfortunately, we had you in our sights for this year, but unfortunately, the pandemic put paid to that. So I'm really very grateful that you found time in your busy schedule. You're starting to film a new series, a rehearse for a new series of BBC's Baptiste next week. So thank you for making time for us for an in-conversation. I really appreciate it. When I asked you for a bio, you suggested something like Fiona Shaw is an Irish actor living in London, which is a bit short and certainly doesn't do justice to everything you've achieved and done since you graduated from RADA in 1982, I think it was. I won't list all of your many achievements and your many roles, but I guess what people have known you very well for in recent years, certainly on screen, has been your turn as Carolyn in Killing Eve, for which you received 2 Emmy nominations and a BAFTA last year. And also one of my favorites is your turn as the psychoanalyst in, I absolutely love that, in Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag. It's absolutely fantastic. But as I said, you're about to go and start filming for BBC now. But let's talk about stage first, because I mean, this is not going to be a grim conversation, but let's be realistic. It's not a great time for theatre at the moment. In London, as far as I know, the theatres are closed. In London or in Dublin for a while, we had performances that shut down for the moment. Hopefully it'll open again. But you know, what does it mean to have theatre taken away from us, at least temporarily?
I was very moved by the opening of this programme, and you're saying save our seat. I think you're absolutely right. You know, you have to wait now. I mean, we have to wait. Of course, we can put things on, and sometimes performers will be gasping for the lack of oxygen of performance if they don't perform. But I do think audiences are the lung of the theatre, or they're the oxygen of the actors. And if they can't be there breathing as one, it's terribly hard for the energy of the stage to be fed by that. You know, it's like having one lung if you've got every second seat empty. So it's the cruelest time for an art form that doesn't ask very much, actually, of humanity. It just needs them to turn up. It needs, as Peter Brook says, one person to cross a space and another person to look at them. But if this other person isn't allowed into a room, then that can't happen. And I'm very concerned, of course, about the young actors, particularly the ones who are just coming out of drama school or any training, who need that airlift to kind of practice, which is to practice not at home. Singers too have this problem, but actors particularly, but to practice with an audience, because acting is a conversation with an audience. It's not, you're never acting at the audience, you're acting with the audience. So I think it's a moment of true concern, and my hat's off to people like you who have to keep the thing going.
I mean, you're right, I suppose, certainly for people who've recently graduated, and they probably graduated later, for people who are midway through or about to start their career training as actors, for the short term at least, it's quite discouraging. What words of encouragement do you have to get them to take heart?
But one thing that's on their side in general is time. That's not on mine. You know, I think when you're young, you do have piles of time, but it is time to be used, not wasted. I would say, and of course, in a way, nothing is wasted. Life isn't, you know, there's nothing about life that wastes time. You just take things in. But I would encourage them, of course, normally I would encourage them to travel, which is a thing they can't do. But if you can't go out, look in and, I don't know, read, you know, it's what Herzog would say, just read every book you can find. Read as much as you can, and maybe explore other areas that have nothing to do with acting. I think explore the French language, or explore poetry, or explore geography or history, or just explore. And the other thing I would say is try and stay fit.
Try and stay fit.
Yeah, that's hard. That's the hardest, I think.
I mean, I think the initial moment of the pandemic was quite paralyzing for people, and they couldn't do anything. They couldn't get their head straight. But I think that's very good advice, is that if you can't do what you'd love to do, what you want to do, that you should use the time well.
I think do something else. A lot of us, when I was overworked, I used to want to do something else. I think, oh God, I must, I really want to visit that place in South America, which of course I never got to, or I wanted to learn French, or I used to play the cello, I wanted to retake up the cello. But these are the moments to do that, because every skill for an actor bumps into every other skill.
I mean, I'm interested in this idea of training. I mean, do you think you can train somebody who doesn't have that innate talent in the first place? So then what does training help somebody? What does it achieve for them?
I think training is fundamentally important, because if you don't train, some people have a natural talent. I don't think you can train somebody who has no talent. But most people have a talent, because everyone tells a story in a pub, or, entertains at home in your family, or if you're quiet, you're often much freer when you're performing than you are in company. So their talents come in various forms. But I think what training does is it gives you the science of the thing, which may sound dry, but it gives you something to aim towards, which is not about what do I feel, or who am I? I'm always saying this to students. If you're playing Hamlet and you just go to be or not to be, that is the question. You can have a great time in your mind, but nobody's going to enjoy it. So it allows you to make something that's happening in here and in here transitive. It allows you to make something cross either the stage or the screen and go into somebody else's mind. And a bit like poetry, you always have to do something greater than the sum of the parts. If you're saying, hello, doctor, hello, vicar, or hello, nurse, usually the hello holds in it not just a greeting, but the state of mind of the person. So an actor's job is to find what is behind all of this, and can I put myself in the imaginative position where when I speak, something else is occurring that is not me, and yet it's profoundly me. I remember the American students saying, Hamlet's just a guy like me. You think, no, he's not. Hamlet is a much more interesting guy than you. But your job is to move towards Hamlet, so you can take the scale of what is written as the notation of a Hamlet and put the coat on, and the coat will be much bigger than you. But if you, with muscle and practice, you'll be able to fit the coat. And then what is really exciting about acting is something happens and you surpass yourself. You become much bigger than you would ever been if you had just stayed in the corner telling a story with a friend in a pub. And you become much more expansive, I suppose is what I mean. Not bigger, but more expansive. And you can communicate to more people. So I've always been very keen on Irish people being trained, because we have in Ireland such a wonderful tradition of storytelling. So in some ways we haven't needed a theatre. But when we got a theatre to discuss Irish issues, they became very relevant for our island. But if you go into a classical training, you're trying to speak to something wider than the island that you're from. So, there's no point in us doing brilliant productions that read very well in Cork and Dublin and Belfast and Galway if they have no meaning for anyone outside that island. But if you can find a way of communicating, I suppose, the archetype of the thing that you're trying to communicate, then the thing will begin to find its own meanings elsewhere. I remember when I was doing The Wasteland, the poem The Wasteland, some years ago, and a lot of it is about the Thames and about how it passes by. When I was performing it in New York, I just felt it was the Thames had suddenly become a New York river. It became the Hudson. And it's that sort of translation that happens in the emotional relationship to language that no other art form can do. Everything else is sort of bound by its own place. But somehow with the theatre, it doesn't have to be bound by its own place. It can be, or it doesn't have to be.
When you talk about finding a way, you're making something sound very simple, but in fact it's not. So what, as a young actor, with only the life experience you have, somebody who thinks you totally get Hamlet, but you don't, what are the steps towards actually getting this experience, getting this insight, this understanding, this knowledge that will enable you someday to play a part like that?
I think the first thing is to find a word or a line that you like. So if it's, I don't know, get thee to an honorary goal, then probably, now this is kind of magic. You might not like to be or not to be. That's the question, whether it's noble in the mind, the stuff that you think, oh, none of this means anything to me. Things and arrows, outrageous sports you take on to get, sea of struggles and by opposing in them, to die, to sleep, to sleep. And you think, actually, no, I quite like that line. To die, to sleep. Yeah, I know about sleeping. I slept sort of 38 hours in the last weekend or something. To die, to sleep. To sleep. And he even repeats it for you. To sleep, perchance to dream. I know dreaming. And slowly, through one word called sleep, because we all do it, and it might have caught your eye rather than all the other bishing and bashing of the language. Try and find your first step into the play through that line. To die, to sleep, to sleep. I think I understand something about that. And slowly, you will find that you're wearing just the T-shirt of that line. And interestingly, I think that when you wear a line, you then make another line. I think writers do something similar. Very often they do not write line one of the play. They write the big row scene with the dad, and then they build the play around it. And I think for actors, you can do the same. You can find that your emotional experience is as ancient as the Greeks, if not older, because we're all the same. And language itself, particularly the English language that we share with these two islands, the language has come out of a series of emotions which sit in the vowel. Sleep. To die. The vowel holds usually some emotional power of the very word. And the consonant holds the brain of the thing. So if you went to that's the emotional power of to die, to sleep. Die. But if you add to die, it's more precise. Sleep has got a complete onomatopoeic sort of feeling of the thing in it. And slowly you realize that this language, instead of being there to confound your feeling, is there to make your feeling more precise. And there's not an actor or a person on the planet who doesn't have that need every now and then to become clearer with what it is you're feeling. Because the feelings are very few. We hate people, we love people, we're jealous of people, we're avaricious, we're greedy, we're full of love, we're full of tenderness, but there's not that many feelings. But thoughts, there are millions. Mm-hmm. And it's this fusion between thought and feeling, which was a thing that occurred with Shakespeare that never really occurred before, and occurred where he was able to take thought and feeling and by sound and rhythm make it the same thing. So if you get the rhythm of Shakespeare, which often is an iambic, da-tum-ti-tum-ti-tum-ti-tum-ti-tum, and your own rhythm, which if you're Irish, tends to be a bit sort of very quick and minor chordish, put the two together and see what happens. It's jazz.
I mean, you joked about not being able to play Carolyn as an Irish person in Killing Eve. I'm interested in this idea of, your formation was Irish. You went over and studied as a young woman in the UK. So what's it like with that kind of mixture of the minor Irish, and then trying to fit into the more kind of, you could say stiff, or you could say formal delivery that we associated with Shakespeare? How do you work your way inside the language?
Well, I would have said something different to you in answer to that 35 years ago, or whenever I began my great move towards this evening. I think I would have thought that I had to find a clearer way of speaking. If I was just living in Cork and going, and why I pray, who might be your mother that you insult, exalt, and all at once over the wretched, what? I have no beauty, I have seen no more than you. About 200,000 people in Cork would understand it and nobody else would. So there is a clarity about the kind of English that you're learning here. But there's been a revolution in the last 20 years, thank goodness, that the clarity with which I learned English is a clarity that does not hold neutrality. It holds all sorts of other things. Now, in Ireland, we might have an association of being grand or something, but it's not that. BBC English is not really about being grand. It's not about lording it over somebody, which the lazy upper class accent would have, where the breath is unable to even barely come out of the lung because they're so lazy. It's a focused kind of expert way of being able to, in general, allow the thought to win over the feeling so that you're more clear than you are full of feeling. But it is controlling. And with this surge of young actors from different classes, of course, and from different races, most importantly, you suddenly realize that the English language is not owned by W1 and anything else that's in the circle within that, but is owned by all the different English languages that have different, phrasing. So in Ireland, if we say, I'm after my dinner, time to reach my dinner, that is as valid as anything you will read in the Oxford English Dictionary. People in certain countries who do not use the definite article, they don't need to. They don't in their language, so they don't when they speak English. That, I think, has become the revolution, and we're in the middle of that. So speak any way you like is what I say, as long as people can understand you.
So you harked back to how you might have spoken if you stayed in Cork, and you were also talking earlier on about if you're shy, acting might be a good outlet for you. Something makes me think that you probably weren't very shy as a young girl in Cork growing up. Were you quite extroverted?
I was very extroverted, and I'm not now.
You're not?
I don't think I am. No, I'm quite, yes, I think I've become shyer. That's, emptying vessels make the most noise maybe when I was younger. I think I had this kind of rocket in my bottom that I wanted to, just experience so much more than was possible for me in what now might be seen as very sleepy, but very nice, very calm Cork. I wanted a huge experience of life. And, there's nothing like the theatre for allowing that, because it's a rather safe way of exploring darker feelings, understanding your childhood, which everybody has sort of feelings about. I mean, mine wasn't particularly traumatic, but it was full of all the mess of childhood and adolescence. And I don't mean to use drama as psychotherapy, but merely that you find neutral places in which you see the same things being enacted. So I think that's what I wanted. And as I've got older, maybe because of acting, I've become much more shy.
Really? I've heard you in recent years in an interview describe yourself as excitable. And what I really enjoy about your performances is you can do Medea, but you can also do Arkadina in Seagull, or you can do Three Men and a Little Lady. So you seem to very much enjoy doing lots of different things and of course, you have a range. But are you really getting shyer?
I think, if I go into a room full of people, I don't go in and go, da-da.
Of course not.
I tend to come, I think I am excitable, but part of that is an Irish thing. I think Irish people are often excitable, but my family are quite excitable. We get very excited when we see each other, when we start talking over each other. And, I think that's just partially a family thing. My mother's very excitable. And it may have, may underneath it be this desire for excitement that may belie a kind of dread of the midwinter gloom that can also come down upon anyone. It's not very balanced in that way, but I'm very happy doing very simple things as I get older, but then I have had a wonderful time. I mean, I love, I do paintings and they're the worst paintings in the world, but I am very calm when I'm doing them. I love doing it. I love gardening, but this is maybe, I'm afraid you've caught me at a very old age.
Oh, come on. Read once you said something along the lines of theatre has to upstage a chat with a good friend. There's something you talked about it earlier on. There's something about, we have a lot available to us now on Netflix or Amazon or whatever. We are able to see you and others and fantastic actors on our screens. But there's something certainly that I'm really missing, and you described it, is about that intensity that you get in a theatre. And I worry as well for the younger people who are now actually for the time being starved even of opportunity to see any kind of theatre. We're all retreating to our screens. Is there any danger, do you think, that we will actually lose an understanding of what it is to try and command the attention of an audience and try to be alongside other spectators in a room to experience the intensity or the hilarity the theatre can offer?
I think there's no doubt that something that happens in the theatre when it's good impresses itself on the mind and on the self when you're watching it that nothing else can. And, I watch many films and watch many series, but not many scenes. Maybe some very good movies, scenes really impale themselves on your mind. Jack Nicholson and, going, and there are a few moments that are caught, but celluloid is dead in that way. It just captures life and holds it and repeats it. But the theatre you participate in, I think it's dangerous if the theatre gets firstly hijacked by what should be seen and should be liked. I think the word should has got to get out of it. The theatre either works or it doesn't work. And more often than not, it doesn't work. You have to be a very patient theatre goer because it's very hard to get it to be very good. But when it is very good, it is better than anything because something happens that bristles in either the truth for want of another, the truth between two actors or three actors, whatever the group of actors are. Something occurs that explodes. Sometimes they're very well written. Brian Friel's moment in Dancing at Lughnasa where the girls dance. If the scenes previous to that moment are played correctly, and we are in tune with the stuckness of those sisters in a farm and their desperation, and then suddenly they dance. As Brian Friel said himself, it frees the play from its language. So the theatre is full of inside-out, upside-down games. You must never be too true to it. What I mean is, if Brian Friel just writes a brilliant play and the words are great, that's one thing. But isn't it ironic that the play is at its best when he stops writing the words and lets somehow this Dionysian madness occur? I think one of the best moments I've ever been part of was I was playing Mother Courage at the National Theatre, and there's a moment when Swiss Cheese, her son, is dragged in and she has to admit that he's her son or not. If she doesn't admit it's her son, then he will be taken away, but she will be allowed to live, and so will her daughter. If she does admit it's her son, they'll probably all be killed. So she denies him. And just before they say, "Is this your son?" there is a pause. And if the scenes have been played, it's always about the setup really, but if the scenes have been played correctly and the audience are all set with the action of the play, and there's a pause while she has to choose whether to say, "This is my son," or "This isn't my son," and there's 1,200 people, the quality of that silence is the quality of a symphony. It is the noisiest silence in the universe, and something about that moment before she denies that it's her son, the audience are identifying with every beat of it. They are torn with the moral dilemma of it. They're not looking at it, they are it. And I, as the actor, all you feel is entirely just one of them. I could have gone and sat in the stalls with them. It's the question mark that hangs and everybody holds it. There's nothing like it, because that moment either works or it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, it was badly performed. If it does work, it's true forever. So it's as immutable or more immutable than the pyramids. So art in the theatre actually does last forever if it hits the heights.
Indeed. Unfortunately, when the theatres are closed, we only have we can still look at the pyramids. You said that theatre is very hard to get right, but we've been doing it since the Greeks. Why is it so hard to get theatre right, despite repeated attempts? What do people do wrong, do you think? What are, the mistakes that they make?
I mean, I just know myself that we underestimate it, I think. We think because we walk and we talk and we in general don't bump into furniture, that acting has something to do with those three activities. But it doesn't really. I mean, it does, of course, they're fundamental. But it's about, I think, a level of spiritual, emotional, mental energy that makes the actor often an annoying person in life, because they often vibrate too fast for an ordinary dinner evening, or they fibrillate almost. They do vibrate. Their energy has to focus up. Even I'm just thinking of the great sort of Hollywood actors. Even Brando, you know, there is a calm on the surface, but there is a tank of energy underneath that person, so that on his case in film, that even the celluloid picks it up. So we'll watch somebody who's vibrating. Put two actors on the stage and you look at one, not the other. Why? They're both standing there. One you look at, one you don't. One of them is vibrating internally, one isn't. So I think we often get it wrong because we get lazy, we get tired, and we think we know how it goes. But the point is that, as in our life or our conversation now, you have no idea where the next second is going. And it's very hard to get to the point where you don't know where the next second is going when you've rehearsed it for 6 weeks and played it for 2 months. But that is the state you have to get to, a sort of innocence. And a group innocence, of course, is a kind of thing of beauty in itself. But I think you have to clean yourself out, and you have to know the detail. I mean, that's what Peter Brook would say. It's all detail. You know, if somebody comes into a shop and says, "Hello, Mrs. Murphy, you know, can I have a pound of sweets?" There's nothing dramatic in that. But if they intend to kill Mrs. Murphy, then obviously there's something will go into the phrase, "I'd love a pound of sweets," that will hold an intriguing vibrancy that will teach us more about that person. And I think it's all in rhythm. I think a lot of it is in rhythm. So I think we get it wrong because we get the rhythm wrong. Usually plays are too slow. Usually people speak too slowly. Usually they should think fast and speak clearly, but not necessarily slowly. So I think it's just...
Think fast, speak clearly. And how does this inform your own approach when you're directing pieces? What do you watch out for with performers?
What I'm always trying to do, because it interests me, I don't know if I'm right, but what I've always tried to do is that... I've mainly, by the way, just directed operas. I try and speak particular of plays because I feel that I've worked with such good directors. I don't dare go near my fellow actors, but so I tend to do it with singers, is to try and make people responsible for what they're singing. So if a fellow comes in and says, you know, I'm Figaro, where do you want me to stand? I said, where would you like to stand? You know, where would you? And they all go, what? You know, I've got to sing a high C. Where do you tell me? But I try and let things occur so that things can occur, and then you nail them, because the person, you know, it's a bit like trying on clothes in a shop. You know, you try them on, and for some reason this thing suits you better than that thing. And if you can be sympathetic, then you can get the added bonus of the person having the infinity of who they are inside them. And so to all young actors, you know, it's very hard for us. I don't know why I'm saying us about you, because you're about 100 years younger than me. But if you and I are trying to direct a 20-year-old actors, you just have to listen, and you can hear when they are absolutely on the spine of their being, however young. It's not a matter of style or age, because when it is, we would be outmoded and want them to do it like we think it should be done. But there are certain things that exist irrespective of the time that you're doing it. You must always be transitive. It must always communicate. You must always know what the rhythm of the language is. And you can either go with the rhythm or go against it. But you must know what you're doing. And you must always know if there is a complicated thought, whether it is enough, or if there isn't a complicated thought, what is the thought underneath that thought? That's all you need to know. And if you do those three things, it doesn't matter whether you're 20 or 80, the same rules apply. And in that way, I think all life, in the same way that playing the piano is largely scales, just learn them and a few chords, and getting better at it is just the practice of your life.
Practice is really important. You mentioned admiring somebody like Marlon Brando on screen, but you know, in your career as an actor, when you were training or even subsequently, are there actors whose performances you learnt from? I mean, of course you do all the time. Are there any who you particularly admired and you thought before you became your own self that you wanted to emulate as a performer?
Well, funny enough, oddly, that wasn't particularly the route that I was being taken on, because when I was being brought up in Cork, we didn't see very much. We had a very good amateur theatre called the Everyman Theatre in Cork, which was just wonderful because they often saw plays in London, the directors, and they would remount them in Cork. So we saw a lot of English comedies actually. But you know, it was great, lively place. But we didn't see, we weren't particularly interested in film. I think it was to do with the period, or my family or whatever. We didn't see a lot. We heard more opera actually than we did see plays. We heard more music than we did plays. So when I went to RADA first and subsequently to the National and then the RSC, I was often the most ignorant in the group. But the good thing about that, I think ignorance is a very, very good tool, because you start using other references other than other performances. So you're not trying to be part of a tradition that you weren't part of anyway. And people used to say to me, "Are you going to play that like that? That's so..." No. And I would go home and not sleep. But usually I was I'd found my own way in. And I wouldn't encourage anybody necessarily to emulate someone else. The actors I know that do get slightly caught in the period of the other person. So I try not to stay ignorant, but I mean, many performances. Usually, the performers I love are people I could never be. You know, Isabelle Huppert is a superb actress because she can turn into anything. But you know, there's no point in me trying to be like Isabelle Huppert. She's about 5'3". You know, she's just a genius of interiority. But when I came to play Carolyn in Killing Eve, I had made a pact with myself that I would not do anything I'd ever done before. Wow. And so I tried to, normally because I've had to be on the stage so often and play big houses, then my chest and my brain are connected to a kind of way of clarifying a huge issue, like I've just mentioned, or being the person who holds the moral right in the evening, rather than a character who's being evil or good. I'm usually trying to show the ambiguity of life, or whether you're playing Electra and you are both in the right, or you play you're in the right, but somewhere you know that character isn't entirely in the right because that's the nature of Greek tragedy, or you're playing Medea and you know that you're entirely logical to find yourself killing the children, but you know it's wrong. These knife edges are challenging to play, but in the end, you just have to offer them in their entirety.
You spoke about steering clear of theatre because you've worked with some really good directors. What have you learned from directors as a performer? What have you incorporated into your practice if you've gone on in your career? Or is it very specific to each production?
I think I was lucky. I mean, I worked with very good directors. At the Royal Shakespeare Company, we had very good directors because I now see I had about 3 adolescents. You know, I went to university in Cork, and then I started again and went to RADA, and so I had another education. And then I went to the Royal Shakespeare Company and I had another education. So I was 27 really before I was in any way trained, I think, you know. And because at the Royal Shakespeare Company, we had directors who would give us lessons on sonnets every morning. So sonnets are like little bombshells of plays. Incidentally, Yeats' poems are also often little bombshells. They're very good things to practice. They're entire plays because they come from an emotional heart. They're usually not exploring something. They're actually driving a story through. You can make lots of films or plays out of Shakespeare, out of Yeats's, you know. We sat together at one summer's end, that beautiful wise woman, your good friend, and you and I, and talked of poetry. Already, it's a movie, you know. It's marvelous. So we were trained on these little pieces. So I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from fellow actors, people like Alan Rickman, who were, again, completely different energy to mine. I was very ebullient and he was very reticent, but he was very good at making me become stiller, I suppose, in some way. And then I was lucky in that I began to work in 1989 with Deborah Warner. And just, I don't know why, but her clarity, her polish, her puritanism, and my, my cavalierdom, somehow they were a very good combination. So I came up with lots of ideas that were going nowhere. And she would take the best of them and just polish them. And her patience, because I was often quite slow for the reasons earlier. I wasn't emulating anyone. I was kind of trying to find my own way through this language. And I did a lot with her. Once every 2 years, we would do a play over a quite long period. So I think we did about 15 plays over about 30 years. And that was an education each time, I could say. Maybe by the end, you know, the thing had lost its novelty for both of us. But with each play, we tried to approach it in a different way, and it was a new mountain to climb. There wasn't a theory. She actually remains incredibly open, and that was very good for me. But I loved working with Stephen Daldry, who's very dictatorial, and then of course the movie directors who are of a different mind altogether. Bob Rafelson has a mind of a prairie. He just shifts scenes round. If you have a secret love affair, he'll say, no, why don't we have a wedding party? If you have a dinner party where ladies leave the table, he says, why don't you all stay? The American mind is a completely different mind. That's been very educational too. But the best directors, funny enough, there can be things on television. Somebody's saying, no, you don't need to do that. And you think, maybe I do. You think, no, you don't need to do that. And when you don't need to do something, the other person takes responsibility for your not doing it. And that's a good thing. And then you don't have to do it and you find that you're free.
I still remember vividly your performance as Medea in the Abbey Theatre. I think it was in 2000. But yes, that's an amazing thing that you point out, to be able to work with the director, not on one gig, but over a sustained period repeatedly. People talk about ensembles of actors learning from each other, but I imagine there's something very valuable in being able to sustain that kind of relationship with the director too.
There is, but it's not the only way. In fact, and I've worked a lot with Fiona Shaw, I think it was Geraldine McEwen who I did The Way of the World with, and also The Rivals many years ago when I first left RADA. She said, it is a myth that you need to be part of a community. It's amazing how quickly you can make a tribe out of a cast. It's true, because they're all skilled, they all meet, you're throwing yourself into the ring, and you're leaving a lot of yourself outside. You're just throwing the acting bit of you into the ring. So, it's like dances. You can just suddenly dance together. You can suddenly play music together. So I don't think you need to have these long-term working relationships, but in my case, that's what happened. But it doesn't. But I would say to the actors who are at home tonight, who are behind a screen, and if you are bubbling with somebody or even on screen, by all means, direct each other. Just find a scene. Just practice with each other, because it does build possibility.
I'm interested to talk a little bit more about the relationship between the actor and director. You talked about this thing about the person taking responsibility if they contradict the other's choice. What do you think actors should expect of directors, or what should they offer to them correspondingly?
Inspiration.
Define inspiration.
I think actors are amazing people, because the margin of error is so great, and the humiliation that they're willing to put up with in themselves. I mean, most of the 6-week period, or 5 weeks, or however length is your rehearsal period, is spent being wrong, not being right. But of course, there is no wrong as well. So I often I often get an idea and I'm sure I'm right, and off I go following the idea, and about 3 weeks later realize I was completely wrong. But of course, there's no fault in that. You then work quite quickly to get to what is the better idea. And a director needs patience, so that you mustn't say, well, you're not going to do that like that. You've got to do it like this. Because if a director tells the actor what to do, then the actor will be unable not to have the director running around his or her brain all through the performance, and it'll never belong to the actor. So directors too have to be very special people who allow the actor time to adjust to this new universe that you're both building together. And the combination is of openness, and I think actors deserve that. They deserve to feel safe and free and not judged. I mean, all the usual things. They have to be judged in the end, and you can be very fierce in your judgment as a director once the thing isn't working, because by then people understand that you're a spatial animal. You're in a space. If you're in the wrong space, you're in the wrong space. I mean, I could stay here, and it's probably, I might say it's my choice, but it probably won't in the end be of any great value to our conversation. So it's better if a director directs you. I think they're like gardeners, directors. They just garden and they nurture.
You think the director has to know everything?
Not at all. No, better if they know nothing. But they should know a few things. They need to know that they can hold the thing. And ideally, a good director has a good ear and knows the rhythm. Most plays are ruined by an actor who's too slow. Like often only one. but it'll ruin the evening. So the director has to keep a conductor's whip on the evening. And I think in that way, directors need to be present more often and to tune plays. Don't let them sprawl and, keep going back. They don't last long on their own plays. They need to be directed all the time.
And do you find it hard to switch gears between performing for a screen or performing for a live audience? Or is it something you've done so often now it's easy?
Well, what I was saying earlier about I decided, from doing all these big plays, I decided on Killing Eve to try and do something to not give the information that normally I feel I was trained to give. And I began to withhold information, and I wasn't sure it would work. So that was a new experiment. But often in films, I think I've done too much. Though sometimes, there's a myth that you have to do nothing on film. Again, this nothing has to be motored by something inside you. I once played a judge in a film by accident. I was asked to do it in Hollywood with Tony Hopkins, and Tony Hopkins was playing obviously the male protagonist who was being judged in this courtroom, and he said, "I'll direct you," and he would sit down while I was up in the court, doing stop, order. He would go, "No, less." And I just said, "Look, my less is so much less interesting than Tony Hopkins' less." Or I've been in big plays, films like Three Men and a Lady, where the performances are so big, I didn't give a damn. And the camera's caught it and hasn't minded it. So again, I can give you 20 rules that I've learned, but they don't all work all the time. Sometimes
Sure.
I'm very surprised, and styles change and things like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking not so much of the kind of the amplitude of your performance or those kind of choices, but just the fact that you don't have the benefit of an audience giving you feedback throughout the evening of a show, that it's so disjointed and discontinuous and so on. But presumably you don't find this challenging at all at this stage.
I do. I mean, there's nothing like the audience. I feel more relaxed on a stage than anywhere else in my life. That's really weird. Of course, I'm nervous before I go on, and then I go on, and I'm more totally myself, which probably says something very bad about how incomplete I am. But I feel very relaxed. I feel like a baby in the womb when I'm on the stage, in something that's working well, because somehow I feel I'm part of that group. It's like being part of a village. I really enjoy that feeling. And it doesn't matter what country you're in. You can be in France where people aren't necessarily understanding every word you say, and you can feel very relaxed on the stage. In front of a camera, I'm always got one eye going, I hope they edit this bit out, and I hope they don't use this bit. And I'm furious when I see something knowing that they picked the thing that suited the grading instead of the thing that was the better performance. So again, you do want directors on film who take the best performance, and then you perform for them. It's kind of a conversation as well, and it's great fun if you can make the crew laugh. If the cameraman starts shaking, then you're onto a good thing.
Are you saying you're mischievous on set?
I'm not particularly, no. Actually, I would be more, I think, as would most people, if there was more time. The lack of time on film sets is terrifying.
Fiona, coming to the end of our conversation, I'm really grateful, and I found what you spoke of really inspiring. I suppose at a time when we can't do the thing we love, which is to watch theatre and watch performances like yours. It's very encouraging, very heartening, very inspiring to have you speak personally of what theatre means for you and how you're attracted to it and what it actually means to perform and what it needs to be. The occasion of our conversation is our conferring on you an award for outstanding service to Irish theatre for lifetime's achievement. I believe it arrived today by courier. It may be beside you off camera. I'd be grateful if you could accept it.
I'm going to put it here and accept it from you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much.
This is a beautiful award, and really, a glut of riches. But this is really, you can see it there. It's an absolutely.
The artist's name is Eamon Gill, I believe.
Well, thank you very much. But I also want to say, Willie, what you're doing is you're keeping the idea of festival going. And it is a festival, the whole of drama is a kind of, it was born in festivals, under Dionysius festivals. And I think it's superb that you keep, giving people like me awards. I'm thrilled. But it keeps the event going. It's about event. And I look forward to the Dublin Theatre Festival being as big and as important an event as it's always been. But it's wonderful that you kept it going in this time.
Thank you, Fiona. Well, reciprocally, the only reason that I do it is so that we can watch performers like you on stage. So thank you very much. Good luck with filming at Baptiste next week.
Thank you.
I hope the rain...
Maybe one day I'll come join you in Dublin.
Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The stage is bare. The seats are empty. Everyone has gone home. But we'll be together again. We'll laugh, we'll cry, we'll cheer. We'll leap to our feet and applaud. Until then, help us save your seat.